Going on YouTube, Cloverbells here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to be doing a recap of the EUIC, aka the European International Championships, right? So I held off on this video a little bit just because I think there was a small delay in releasing the open team sheet on the Victory Road page, so I wanted to wait until that was out before I could do a video like this. But you know, I still held it off for like another day or so just because I was busy. Alright, but now that we have the open team sheets, and now we can start discussing some results and some trends and things to take away moving forward as we head into, you know, the other upcoming regionals in the upcoming month of May, and see where we can go with this current format that we have, you know, throughout June. Okay, so basically, you know, this is the premise from Fort Wayne, right? Because since Fort Wayne, a couple weeks have passed. So certain people have, you know, they looked at that tournament and then they said, okay, based on what I saw, I'm going to try X, Y, and Z now. This is what looks like is going to be popular. This is what, you know, is not so great. And then, you know, this is where I'm going to take my team in terms of like, you know, the EUIC, right? So, you know, there's a couple of things and a couple of questions that, you know, you want to ask before you go into this regional, or actually this IC in general. How good is, you know, the Dondozo teams, or how good is Dondozo this format? Is the palette balance still the team to beat? You know, are there other kinds of archetypes that are really good into the balance stuff? Is there trick room teams? Is there going to be Wo-Chien, a sighting here that can maybe crack the top cut? You know, these are some of the questions that, you know, we had going into the EUIC, right? And then we had a good final between Paul Chua and Gabriele Gatti. Basically the same kind of team, except the difference in the dragon of choice, which was Roaring Moon on Paul's side, and Back Scalper on Gabriele Gatti's on his side. But of course, so there was some difference in the movesets, and we're going to talk about both of their teams in a second, right? But it was just interesting to note like how well balanced actually did in this format, right? Well, actually this IC in general, not necessarily the format, but of course it did also do well overall right now in this current metagame. But what we're going to do now is look at the both teams from Paul and Gabriele, and then look at some other teams that I thought were rather interesting, some other archetypes also that could see some rise in play, and then at the end we'll make some predictions for the upcoming regionals moving forward. All right, so let's take a look at Paul and Gatti's team. Okay, so let's look at Gabriele Gatti's team first. So basically, the Palafin was also the first thing that you know, we all knew that was very different and a little bit cool in that sense. And it has substitute, right? And of course, Paul did not have substitute, but no, you know who did. But the idea with substitute is you're able to punish the opponents if you can like make a good prediction, right? And if you remember, like back in Sword and Shield, like Zacian substitute, right? What was the goal of Zacian substitute back then? It's so that first of all you preserve its longevity. Of course, you're able to stall Tailwind and Trick Room turns, you know, by alternating sub and protect. But also you kind of stop the intimidate stuff, right? And in this sense, you know, what is one way that you can neuter Palafin's damage? Either you wisp it or you intimidate it. And substitute is a pretty good answer into both of those things, right? So smart idea from Agati to go ahead and put substitute over here instead of like Haze, because now what Agati is saying is, okay, for the Dondozo matchup, I'm not going to click Haze anymore. I'm just going to put Clear Smog on Amoonguss and, you know, have something for that in that sense, right? So good idea there. And then, of course, over here, we have the Howl on the Arcanine, you know, just to boost up the damage from the Palafin, the Back Scalper itself, and also the Tinglu a little bit, right? So that smart idea there with the Howl. I really like Howl Arcanine in this format. Okay, and he gave up the Extreme Suit, which is okay. You still have good priority with the Palafin and the Back Scalper over here. Of course, we know what Amoonguss does, so we don't really need to discuss anymore there. The Tinglu does have Stone Edge, and this is a nice little adaptation for the Assault Vest Tinglu. I think this is just for Talonflame stuff, so this way you can deny the Tailwind stuff and just one-shot it eventually, right? So good rock coverage there. The Thunderbolt on the Fluttermane is, of course, for stuff like opposing Palafins, but more so the Gyarados stuff. Because without an electric coverage here, how are you hitting the Gyarados? Not really very well, right? So I feel like the Thunderbolt is definitely much needed here. And of course, Back Scalper with Clear Amulet, you can't really intimidate it now, so it gets to keep all that damage and, you know, just keep going for Icicle Crashes, Glaive Rush, and Ice Shard. And again, because you're a Clear Amulet and not the loaded dice, you don't have the Icicle Spirit, and you have to rely on this inaccurate Icicle Crash. And that did come into play in one of the games, as we know, against Paul. That key miss on the Amoonguss allowed it to stay on the field and do what it needed to do, and then Paul was able to clutch things up with you know, starting from that miss. Not the whole reason why he won, of course, but you know, the miss was important, right? But overall, some cool ideas here on what is otherwise on paper a very standard 6 for a balanced team. Pala balance, all right. Paul also had Pala balance, but the different series he had the Roaring Moon, Dragon Dance Roaring Moon, and it's very scary, right? If you're able to get one off, you can pretty much sweep through an entire team, just because it does so much damage. And then over here, this is a smart thing from the Tinglu, Sand Tube. All right, so you're able to just trap things and then just do a little bit of chip damage over time. I've tried Sand Tube Tinglu previously. It's actually pretty good. I like it a lot. It's really nice on like those parish teams with you know, Gothitelle stuff, and you know, or even like Lamora, where you're just able to, you know, keep them in and then they can't switch and then they just keep taking chip damage. There's no Howl here, it's just extreme speed, of course, on the Arcanine. There's Haze on the Palafin instead of Substitute. Protect on the Amoonguss because you have Haze on the Palafin and you still have the electric coverage on the Thunderbolt of the Thunderbolt on the Fluttermane, right? Choice specs idea. So, but anyway, that's the main difference between these two teams. But again, they're still following the balanced archetype. And throughout the entire tournament, there were a bunch of balanced teams, right? And if you saw our previous video, we gave a lot of options and a lot of different variations of what the balanced team would look like in the regulationC format. So if you haven't watched that video, go ahead and take a look at that. Because if you're interested in building a balanced team, this is not the only way to do it by these two, right? There's a lot of different ways where you can still build balance if you follow the template that we gave in the previous video, right? You still had that Fire Water Grass Core, which in itself is different depending on the options you choose. You slap on the Fluttermane, that doesn't change. But then the last two options, it's either like a Dragon type and a Steel type and a Tinglu, a Steel type and an Iron Hands, a Dragon and a Tinglu. You know, lots of different variations in that last two slot, but at the very least, the template is more or less the same. All right, so good ideas here from Paul and Nagati, and congratulations on both of them to reaching this far, and of course for Paul, because he won the whole thing. But balance is the key in this format at the moment, and what we're gonna do is scroll down and take a look at some of the cool ideas that some of these balance teams had. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, so like we mentioned, balance was the story for most of this tournament, and there's a lot of different variations that you can do with balance, and we're just going to show a couple here. And again, like we mentioned, we did do a video on this previously, but here's another one with the Dragon of Choice being Garchomp. There's a Gyarados, Chiyu, and Amoonguss, so there's your Fire Water Grass core. And then to round out the Fantasy core with Dragon Fairy Steel with Fluttermane and Kingambit over here, right? So lots of good options for defensive play, right? A lot of pivoting positioning. You can neuter attack damage with Gyarados with the Intimidate. You have Redirection with the Amoonguss. You have some status infliction, you know, with Thunder Wave and Spore, of course. And then you have the occasional burns that you can get with Heat Wave, right? And then from there, you know, Kingambit's really good into like the slower stuff, just because you have all that bulk and you have, of course, Sucker Punch. And good synergy with Garchomp here with the Terra Flying over here. And you can even lead these two sometimes if they want to lead their own Arcanine or their own Gyarados. Because, you know, for that matter, you can just get a Defiant boost and change your Terra against the Arcanine, and then you're kind of okay, right? So another kind of balanced team here is this one. So no Dragon here, but instead you have the Iron Hands, and this is still more or less a balanced team. Still following the same template, except here this is a Swords Dance Iron Hands, which is really good into, again, opposing Palafins and Gyarados. So that means you're giving up the electric coverage on the Fluttermane over here, so you're going back to something like Dazzling Gleam, double fairy coverage over here, but more or less the same idea. Julio, he's doing the Dragonite Chenpao stuff, again, with a Arcanine Palafin, Amoonguss, Dragon Fairy Steel, Fire Water Grass Core, and then the Steel type choice here is the Goldango, alright, and which is actually kind of cool. I feel like Goldango's dropped a little bit in this format, just because of all the Dark types running around, but it's still pretty good. And here's Thunderbolt, again, there's that coverage there for, you know, opposing Gyarados and Palafins, so, you know, really cool idea here with this balanced team. Yakos over here, so now, again, same idea. You know, Fluttermane and Tinglu this time, and then still Palafin, Amoonguss, Arcanine with the Iron Hands. So Iron Hands and Tinglu on the same team, that's okay as well. But again, this is still, you know, you combo well with Iron Hands Palafin, right? Because you're able to go for the Volt Switch turn 1 when you Heart Switch the Palafin, and then after at the end of the turn you get the Palafin back in, and it's able to be in a good spot, right? And you preserve the Fake Out on the Iron Hands for then, you know, maybe in the end game, for example. Lumberry Tinglu is actually interesting, all right, with Protect. So, but that's because the Iron Hands has the Assault Vest, right? So, again, the idea is you're still following the same template with this balanced kind of archetype. I'm just showing like a couple examples here, but the idea is, you know, with balance, you know, you have something for every kind of matchup. You're not super good into anything, but you always have something into everything else, right? Just because of the options that you have on your team. Okay, it's not like where you're a hyper offensive team, you just go with the tailwind stuff and hope you hit hard, not much positional play, and just hope for the best. You know, with the amount of offensive pressure that kind of team can do, and you can overwhelm a lot of people that way. But in terms of like, you know, being able to reposition your pieces, kind of like chess, and then just get a better board state in the next turn by going for those repositioning moves and hard switching, then that means a little bit slower play, but a little bit more balanced play, right? And from there, you know, the better players and the ones that make better decisions are usually going to come out on top. All right. So now what we're going to do is take a look at some other archetypes that we saw that were still pretty good in the EUIC. All right. So let's start with Dondozo stuff. Okay. So looking at Dondozo, like how good was it going to be in this format, right? In Regulation C, we know it's not as good as, you know, Regulation A or even Regulation B, but is it still a viable option? And the answer is yes, right? And within the day 2 cut, there's still 9 Dondozo teams in the day 2 cut, so that means it's still like relatively okay to still use, even though it's not as good as it once was, right? So 2 in the top 8, you know, same 6 but slightly different sets from Alexander and Joan. So if we look at Alexander's team, you know, again, they have the same 6. Besides the Dondozo Tatsugiri stuff, it is, you know, Chiyu with the Glomora Iron Bundle combination, 3 special attackers, and then of course there's a Dragonite over here. So with Dragonite, there's a choice band on this Dragonite, whereas in Joan's team it was a Lumberry Dragonite with Protect. So a little bit more damage from Alexander's side, and then the Lumberry a little bit more flexibility in against the Will-O-Wisp and the, you know, the Spore stuff. Multi-skill over here, so that's still the same. The Glomora stuff is Assault Vest. Just because the focus sash is on the Chiyu over here. I feel like sash Chiyu is a little bit more common now than some of the other stuff that we've begun to see, because it's so frail, right? So it just pays to, you know, put a sash on this thing and then just make Iron Bundle and your Glomora hit extra hard, right? So I feel like this makes a lot of sense. Bundle's still okay, you know, it has dropped a little bit in usage, but it still has, you know, Icy Wind Pressure, of course, to get good speed control. This way you can hit hard with your Chiyus and your Glomoras, for that matter. Outrage Dragonite on Alexander's side, along with Ice Spinner, Extreme Speed Earthquake, which is actually really, really interesting. And then over here, again, with the Dondozos here, Unaware on this side from Joan, and then Oblivious from the Dondozo over here on Alexander's side. So, but still, Terra Grass either way, this is really good against, you know, the Palafin stuff. And of course, it's Terra Blast, Terra Grass, you know, just to be able to like counter them relatively well. But again, Dondozo with Glomora stuff is actually really, really good. So if you're trying to still use Dondozo, I would just use a 6 like this from either Alexander or Joan. Okay, we look at Carson Confer. I believe this is pretty much the same kind of idea with the same squad. Maybe they even built together, who knows. But from Andrea Pagano. All right, so this is basically Dondozo Tatsugiri with the big 4, the fat core as we call them, you know, with the Arcanine, Amoonguss, Fluttermane, Palafin stuff. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You know, just take Dondozo and slap on the big 4, you know, make you can get day 2 cut like that. Alejandro over here, so you still have Dragonite with the choice band stuff like we saw, you know, from Alexander over here. But over here on this side, you still have, oh, you have Icy Wind on the Fluttermane, right? Because there's no Iron Bundle over here. There is a Tinglu Amoonguss combination, you know, very, very annoying, of course. And then there's the Chiyu, you know, able to help enable the Fluttermane just do a little bit more damage, right? It's interesting to see Tinglu on the same team as Fluttermane and Chiyu, but of course you can make it work with accurate play. This one is Unaware Dondozo with Protect, Wave Crash, Yawn, and Curse. Oh my goodness, this is a set. This is a set. I would definitely like this set. You know, I think this is one of my favorite Dondozo sets with Yawn Pressure. And then of course Curse, because now you're not reliant on the Tatsugiri, right? And that's also another thing to note, right? This team does not use Tatsugiri. So smart adaptation to try and use Dondozo here with the Curse stuff. Makes a lot of sense. So Chupa Cross over here. So again, it's, you know, Dragonite with the big 3 of Iron Bundle, Chiyu, and the Glomora. You know, same kind of concept as we saw with the other 3. Febsy over here had a different idea. He says, let's get the Corviknight in here. Let's get a little bit more speed control with the Tailwind stuff. So this way our Fluttermane and Iron Bundle can win the mirror, as is our Chi-Yu, which is still Focus Sash over here. But it's still Terra Grass Dondozo with Oblivious. And then there is Water Pulse on Tatsugiri. I guess he doesn't like missing, right? So shout outs to Fezzi over here. Cool team. And then with Corviknight, with the Tailwind, Brave Bird, Roost combination, you're just able to chip damage and then just recover it over time. Amoonguss can't really do much to you because you have a Goggles as well. So smart idea there from Fevzi. Azra Stone over here. And again, this one is Garchomp King Gambit stuff in the back engine. This is a Life Orb Chi-Yu that's going to do a lot of damage. And again, comboed relatively well with the Iron Bundle over here. So you're able to just go for harder hitting Icy Winds. And then, big Heat Waves, especially with this Life Orb stuff. Terra Grass is really nice in terms of getting around Amoonguss. Still Terra Grass Dondozo along with Unaware stuff with Terra Blast, again, for the Palafin stuff. Very, very annoying. But as you can see, you can see a common team in these Dondozo teams. A lot of them have the Chi-Yu Fluttermane Iron Bundle combination, and then there's just a filler with either Glamora or either with the Dragonite, for example, right? But if there was a question whether Dondozo is still viable in Regulation C, of course the answer is yes. Is it as good as Regulation B/A? The answer is no, but it is still very, very good, and you have to respect it when you're team building, right? You can't just not or pretty much ignore it because then you just lose to it when you do see it, right? Because it's still common, okay? I would say it's a low A tier, high B tier kind of duo with Dondozo and Tatsugiri, and some people are now starting to use without Tatsugiri. So it's very interesting in how it all works, right? But Dondozo, still okay. Okay, the next thing that we're gonna look at is the Wo-Chien stuff. So basically, did we really see it in the European International Championships? Could Wo-Chien redeem himself from a not so great showing in Fort Wayne? And the answer is not really. So if we look in the top 8, no Wo-Chien. If we look in the top 16, also no Wo-Chien. If we go down into top 32, can we find a Wo-Chien? The answer is still no. As we keep going down, is there any Wo-Chien at all? Okay, and so far I'm in the top 40, nothing, unless I missed it, but I don't think I did. Yeah, man, I mean, I would have to go all the way down to number 60 over here from Megan Rattle. So this is a really cool Wo-Chien team. I've seen this being played a little bit on some of the online ladder stuff with this 6. It is Sash Glamor over here, and then of course Chi-Yu Fluttermane. The Gyarados over here, I've seen this sometimes be Whirlpool, but again, Waterfall makes sense over here. But this is the only, you have to go all the way down to top 60 to see a top Wo-Chien team. And it's hard, right? Because, with Wo-Chien, it just gets walled by Amoonguss, okay? Because it can't leech seeded, all right? And then, it just takes super effective damage, 4 times weak to bug. So that Pollen Puff from an Amoonguss is actually doing a lot of damage, and you can't recover because you can't leech seed it, right? And you can't force it to switch out. So the only way to do that is to just use these other Pokemon that can beat the Amoonguss, right? The Chi-Yu and the Glamora can do it a little bit, right? But other than that, it's just really hard to use, and it takes too much time to get it going sometimes, right? Because when teams are just pumping out all this offense with some of their Art of Ruin Pokemon, like, throwing in the Chien-Paos and the Chi-Yus and dishing out so much more damage, the Wo-Chien sometimes has hard to keep up. And when it does Terra, now you can just Spore it. So it gets a little bit tricky sometimes. But this is a team that works with Wo-Chien, with the pressure from the Fluttermane and the Chi-Yu and the Glamora. And then, of course, Gyarados and the Tinglu are just able to support overall by reducing the damage that you would take from either the special attacking side or the physical side, because you have the Intimidate and the Vessel of Ruin support, right? But Wo-Chien has had a little bit of a trickier time. Let's go down to see if we can find another one at the very least. So that was it. There was only one Wo-Chien in day 2 cut. Then if we keep going down into some of the 6 series, maybe we can find another one and see if it does something here. But so far, no luck. All right, I'm getting close to the top 100, and we got one. So, but same idea, right? So if there was a way to use Wo-Chien, I feel like this is the core, where you have Fluttermane, you have the Glamora, and you have a Gyarados here. So instead of the Tinglu, you have an Iron Hands. Makes sense. And instead of a Chi-Yu, there is a Volcarona over here. So, similar ideas, but the core is pretty much still the same. I feel like you still want, like, Fluttermane, Gyarados, and Glimmora on these teams with Wo-Chien, and then the other two can be like fillers. But you know, same idea. Rage Powder is actually really good. I really like Volcarona in this format. I just want to say that, you know, access to Rage Powder and then Struggle Bug or even, you know, Bug Buzz, you know, bug coverage is really good against the Rune Pokemon. It's really nice. And then of course you get support moves like Will-O-Wisp and Heat Wave. So really nice support Volcarona over here. Because when you go for Gyarados, you lose out on stuff like Will-O-Wisp that you would get from Arcanine. But you know, with the Volcarona option here, that makes a little bit more sense. And then this is an aggressive Gyarados with Terra Blast, Dragon Dance stuff. So really cool idea there. This is Hex Fluttermane because you have Corrosion, you know, Venoshock, Glimmora over here. So really nice options there. But overall, I feel like, you know, with Megan's team and Juanma's team, you know, this is the way to go about it. Similar core ideas, just a couple of differences in the way you use them, and you know, your two fillers. If we keep going, can we find another one? We do. This one is on a Dondozo team. So Dondozo with Glimmora again, but this time there's a Wo-Chien instead of something like a Fluttermane. I feel like Fluttermane would just be a little bit better, but you know, this still makes sense. You're able to chip stuff, you know, with Wo-Chien and Glimmora. Of course, you know, you're just going for Leech Seed, going for the poison stuff, making them switch. So this way, if they try to reset Leech Seed, you poison them. That's the whole idea with putting Glimmora on the same team as a Wo-Chien. And then from there, it's just, okay, we're just going to slap on Dondozo, Tatsugiri, and then two broken special attackers like Iron Bundle and Chiyu. And now everything is just going to hit hard. And then from there, we just clean up with Dondozo. Makes a lot of sense. All right, anything else? After this, let's just try and find one more. But look, I'm already down to like the 115s, and I've only found 3 Wo-Chien teams, right? So, and that just goes to show how difficult it is to use in this kind of format. And I don't think I need, yeah, that was it. Just 3 Wo-Chiens in the top 128, okay? Unless I missed one, but I don't think I did. You know, it's a little bit tricky to use, but it can work on some of these archetypes and some of these cores that I just showed you here. All right, let's keep going. Okay, the next thing I also want to look at is like some of the steel types that we saw in this tournament that are a little bit beside some of the meta standard stuff. Like we know what we're getting with King Gambit, Goldango, and Corviknight. Those are your premier steel types. But here on my screen, I have 3 steel types that we saw in the EUIC that also did relatively well and had some results. And it just goes to show you, right? If you're willing to explore something, then you have the time to put the pieces around it. It can do relatively well, right? So here's an example, right? Here's Orthworm, and you might say, well, what the heck does Orthworm do, right? So look at the ability, Earth Eater. Okay, you get healed when you get hit by a ground wave. Imagine the Tinglu stuff with Stomping Tantrum / Fissure. Orthworm kind of just bodies that. And then if you look at this set here with Iron Defense, Body Press, Heavy Slam, and of course the Shed Tail, now what you're able to do is start going for these base 145 body presses, right? And especially after like Iron Defenses, this Orthworm is going to hit like a truck. All right, and then at the same time, again, you're covering for the Tinglu stuff. Again, we're going to do like a whole video on Orthworm. Okay, and then you still have like Heavy Slam to pin that Fluttermane slot. Steel coverage is always welcome. And then of course Shed Tail, you go and set up a sub and then you pass it to an ally. How smart was this? You know, from David Kutesh, which we'll look at a squad from him in a second. Scizor, I said before, Scizor has a place in this meta, right? Because you, again, priority bullet punch against Fluttermane is really nice. And then you have Swords Dance to make yourself hit even harder. Clear Amulet to deter certain intimidates. And of course, you are going for like the Technician stuff. But then here, your bug move of choice really depends on either Pounce or U-Turn. Either way, it's okay. Pounce would give you the, of course, the speed control, right? With the -1 speed against the opponent, while U-Turn gives you that pivot option. But either way, Bug is really good against all the dark types from the Rune Pokemon. So, you know, Scizor has a place right now. It gets walled a little bit by some of the other popular meta threats, but still Scizor can do something. I like Scizor on rain teams, by the way. And then over here, here's Bronzong. We just did a video on this earlier, where, again, with Levitate, what is Tinglu doing to you? Nothing. And then same idea is Orthworm, where you're just going for Iron Defense body presses, which is really good into, you know, a lot of the Rune Pokemon because they're weak to fighting moves. You have the Gyro Ball steel coverage against the Fluttermane, and then you get speed control with Trick Room. Bronzong's a good Pokemon, okay? So I really like that it did have itself a placement in the EUIC. But these are 3 steel types that you can use and should use, you know, as well as, like, you know, keeping your opponent off guard. So if we take a look at David Kutesh's team, I really like the team. This is maybe like my favorite team in the entire EUIC. Look at this, okay? First of all, you know, again, we talked about that set. This is his set. That's where like I got it in the, you know, the team builder. But you got Earthquake from Dragonite, you got Earthquake from your own Tinglu, and then you have Bulldoze from Gyarados. Okay, so you have 3 ground moves, you know, positioned next to Orthworm, that where you can heal it and also deal big damage to your opponent and slow it down, you know, with the Bulldoze stuff. So really, really good idea. And then you got good synergy here with like Dragonite Tinglu, right? Because you can Earthquake next to your own Dragonite. Same thing with your Gyarados. You can Earthquake next to each other over here, right? Earthquake from Dragonite and Gyarados because they're both flying types. Makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, Tinglu also has Bulldoze. And this is a choice band Tinglu where, again, you're just doing so much damage with all of these moves. And it's a really, really smart way to try and build around Orthworm, where you still have this Dragon Fairy Steel Core. And again, you still have like a water type and a fire type potentially, like with the Terrafire Orthworm. So this way you can't really burn it for that matter. Really, really smart in terms of trying to build around Orthworm here. So shout outs to Hamster Mania, aka David Kutesh. Over here, we got Scizor over here with Chien-Pao. I feel like this is always going to be a good combination, right? Because you're just going for harder hitting bullet punches combined with your Swords Dance is just going to do a lot. And then, of course, the Dragapult along with the Chien-Pao. This is something that we've seen before. It's interesting to see Garchomp over here, like on the same team as Dragapult. But again, big damage all around. Gyarados here to provide Intimidate support. And then Helping Hand is just really, really good against some of your options over here. So good idea to use Scizor here. This one I like as well. With the Back Scalper range stuff with Scizor on here. So you still have Dragon Fairy Steel, Fire, Water, Grass going on. But again, Swords Dance Pounce, Scizor, you know, for extra speed control, and you know, you get the tailwind from the Pelipper. Smart idea to try and use Back Scalper rain with Scizor like this. And again, this is another one of my favorite teams just because of the way I like to do things with Scizor, which is slap it on a rain team. Okay, so good ideas there from the Steel types. And then over here, Bronzong. So maybe one of the only Trick Room teams in the, there were a couple, right? I shouldn't say the only one. But as far as like a one with like a really, really good result, this is it with Bronzong here. I feel like this should have been like Hatterene instead of the Armarouge, but it can still work. But again, Gyro Ball, Body Press, Trick Room, Protect. Okay, so no Iron Defense there. You know, still okay. You still have Mentor, so this way you don't get taunted. But the idea is, you know, you set up Trick Room, you know, with either Bronzong or Hatterene, and then you start setting up, and then you start smashing. I know there's like Ice Spinner running around, but you know, with proper play, you know, it can work. Okay, but nice idea to try and use these Steel types on these teams, and you know, hopefully moving forward in the next region, we see more of these other Steel types besides the usual stuff of like King Gambit, the Corviknight, and the Golden Angles. All right. Okay, just to cover a couple more cool teams that we saw in the EUIC. So basically, this is a Snow team, very similar to what we did with Clover Snow. We still had these 4 options, right, with Chiyu, Fluttermane, and Iron Bundle here with the Obama Snow. So this was the Snow duo, and then we had these 2 as well. And the ground coverage here from the Great Tusk makes a lot of sense. We had Salamence with Earthquake, so that was one idea there. And then, of course, over here was, here's an Iron Hands. We had a Tailwind user in the Corviknight, just to give a little bit more speed control for some of our options here. But Snow works, all right? I'm telling you, Snow concept works. If you can get up this Aurora Veil and then just go with like the Blizzard spam from like, first of all, this is Life Orb, Obama Snow, Blizzard, which is interesting, but it works, right? And I know it works because I've done it. I've played a bunch of teams, you know, with the Snow, and it does relatively well because behind your Aurora Veil, you just ruin all kinds of damage calcs. You're able to survive a lot of hits, and you're able to do a bunch of damage because you have this Chiyu, right? Because you have a lot of special attackers there. And then stuff like my Salamence and my Corviknight were just able to do a lot. Over here, you have all this offensive pressure with Scarf, Great Tusk, so you don't really need the Tailwind, I guess. And then here's like a little bit more synergy with Fake Out, just to be able to try and set up the Aurora Veil or these potential, whatchamacallit, not Tailwind, but the Aurora Veil. Okay, so real cool idea there with the Snow. Pablo's team, of course, this was the Surf Dondozo Life Orb idea with the Choice Band Dreadnought. Really, really cool team. I wanted to try this. I may still, because it's just like such a really cool team to see Dreadnought on some on this Rain team. And in fact, there was a couple other Dreadnought teams with Rain in the EUIC, so that was interesting to know. But this was the coolest one just because it's a Surf Dondozo. Okay, so really cool idea there from Pablo. And then over here, Juanma, or again, with the Paris Trap stuff with Screamtail. you know, with Parasong over here, and of course, the typical Parish core with like Gothitelle, you know, Tinglu, Arcanine, Palafin, and Fluttermane. So you're repositioning a lot. The Palafin has to, you know, switch out anyway, and then you just trap them and start dealing big damage with your Jet Punches. The Tinglu also has Sand Tomb over here, so now they also can't switch out and they're still taking chip damage. Really, really cool idea for a new adaptation of Perish. I really like it a lot. Okay, then over here with Alfredo, so this is another one of those, you know, Murkrow Sun teams where you just go for the Sunny Day, and now you enable the Great Tusk and the Fluttermane, but also the Chi-Yu over here because Heat Wave from Chi-Yu hurts a lot. And then, of course, the Arcanine in Sun can also deal a bunch of damage and also enjoys the Tailwind support. This is an offensive Arcanine, by the way, so that makes a lot of sense too. Then over here, you had Steiner's team also with the Iron Jugulus. Iron Jugulus has a really good spot right now because, again, you're a flying type, so that means the Tinglu stuff is not going to work. And then you have Tailwind support where you're just able to make your squad relatively fast. So, you know, stuff like Fluttermane and Chi-Yu are going to do well into the mirror because you can outspeed them. Then you have the Palafin, you know, so now you don't have to keep going for Jet Crunches. You can also go for Wave Crashes now as well. But, you know, with Iron Jugulus, the fact that Tinglu can't hit you and the fact that you have Tailwind support along with Snarl to render opposing Fluttermanes and Chi-Yus a little bit more useless is also relatively nice. And, of course, the Air Slash for, you know, flinch hacks. So it's a cool idea there. But these are, again, some of the other concepts that I saw moving forward, right? So can we see some stuff like maybe Screamtail do well? But the other stuff I was also looking at was stuff like Rotom and Gastrodon. Let me find a Rotom. I think Colin had Rotom, right? Let me just do a Control F here. Let me find Colin down here. No, maybe go up a little bit more. Yeah, right here. So like I was also looking at Rotom. Like Rotom is also in a pretty good spot because, again, with Levitate, just like Bronzong, the Tinglu can't hit it. You have super effective moves against Palafin and Gyarados, and then you have Volo's support to, you know, neuter those physical attackers, and then you have water coverage against potential Arcanines and opposing Tinglu, for example. So Rotom's in a pretty good spot right now, I would say. And then moving forward, another one that's also really good in terms of a water option, Gastrodon, right? So if we consider Gastrodon, that also makes a lot of sense. Well, I can't find it here, but here, let's just put it over here with Gastrodon. So like Gastrodon kind of like had its 15 minutes of fame and then it died, and then now it's like all of a sudden people are starting to experiment with it a little bit, basically because Palafin is everywhere, right? And you kind of want to catch the Palafins off guard by just going for this Storm Drain stuff with the Gastrodon, right? And then not only that, you have good coverage with ground and ice moves, so really good against opposing Arcanines. Ice coverage for the Dragon types. You also get Yawn support, where you can just force switch outs and, you know, get a little bit more repositioning that way. So Gastrodon has this niche, and I kind of want to do another video on Gastrodon in general, but like it can do relatively well. So I like both Gastrodon and the Rotom situation right now because they both have these niches, you know, not super common Pokemon, but they can work when put on the right team just because they can give you a certain niche that some of these other meta Pokemon cannot give you, all right? But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you liked our little recap on the EUIC. And now we're just going to see where some of these results take us moving forward into these other upcoming regionals. Speaking of regionals, if you are trying to prepare for such regional, or maybe just for online play, or maybe for another online tournament, check out coaching with me on the channel. If you take a look at the video description or in the comment section, we have a link where you can join the channel with the tier 3 sub. And then from there, you're just able to message me and then, you know, on Discord, and then we can coordinate a time on a Discord call where we can get you that team that you need for an upcoming regional. I do a whole team building session where I show you all the EV spreads, the movesets and the items, the whole shebang. You guys know how it is. We're getting close to almost 80 clients on the channel, so we've sent a few already to these regionals. Some of them have already gotten CP. You've seen some of those videos, so if you want to be the next person as one of my students to get championship points, feel free to sign up with coaching on the channel. Again, take a look at the video description and the comment section for access to join the channel with the tier 3 sub. All right, but anyway, that's going to do it for now. We'll be back with another video in the next one. Peace out and have a good one.